In this video, we are going to talk about the additional work that might be required if you're going to be adding a second story home addition to an existing single story building. So let's go ahead and take a look at what might not be obvious to most of you, but will definitely be obvious to some of you. And that's the fact that a single story building requires a smaller footing. For example, a single-story building might require a 12-inch wide footing that is going to be 12 inches high, in addition to the 4, 5, or 6-inch thick concrete slab that will sit on top of these footings, and probably require an upper and lower single number 4 rebar to go all the way around the perimeter of the footings. On a 2-story house, you're probably going to have a 15-inch wide footing along with a 12 to 24-inch tall footing that might have the same rebars, but they might need to be a number 5 rebar. Now, if you're going to add a 2-story building to the back or the side of an existing single-story building, then you're just simply going to be adding larger footings. You're going to be digging around the perimeter of the new structure and adding the correct size footings to begin with. And this is going to be a lot easier most of the time than adding the home addition above the existing structure. And I've done this 2 different ways. And one of those ways will be to add new concrete underneath the existing footings, and that extension might also require additional rebar. And in this example here, I added a beam to each side so that we wouldn't need to add concrete underneath 2 of the walls, which could save us a lot of work. However, underneath the walls that are going to be supporting the structural floor joists above, we will need to add concrete and additional rebar. And since we're going to be using beams with a concentrated load on each corner, we're probably going to need additional structural footings. Now, if I don't use the beams on each side, then I'm probably going to need to add additional concrete underneath the entire perimeter of the building that will be supporting loads above. And to do that, you might need to remove all of the framing. So now you have a couple of different options you can use. Next up, let's take a look at what I would consider to be a little bit easier method, and that would be using some posts and beams above along with the additional footings in the corners. And these can be laid out a variety of different ways if you're not going to be building a rectangular or square room addition. So this method here will require larger footings with more rebar, and you will either need to dig underneath the existing slab or remove a section of the corner of each one of the areas you're going to need to install the new footing in. And I have done that both ways. So basically what we're going to be doing is using the posts and the beam method to transfer all of the weight from the second floor addition down to our new concrete footings. And even though I don't have all the structural hardware in here, you might need hold downs, you might need hangers for each one of the beams that die into the corner, and of course you might need larger beams that aren't going to be sitting directly on top of the walls, which might require you to frame smaller walls all the way around the perimeter of the building, or raise the beams into the upper floor framing. And I've done that before also. So instead of having a beam that would go below the wall framing and be flush with the floor joist above, I raised the beam to where the beam would sit on top of the wall and then installed perimeter blocks in between the floor joists so I could get my perimeter floor joist nailing, and then had the top of the beam stick above the floor about 1 or 2 inches. And you can do that if you're dealing with a 5.5-inch beam and a 5.5-inch wall. However, it would be difficult to use an 8-inch wide beam and have a 5.5-inch wall on something like that. And of course, since I'm not a structural engineer, these are only examples that I've either used in the past or have seen done before. So don't forget to check with local building authorities in your areas to see if building permits or engineering will be required for your project.